All right, my name is Marian Chervin. Before the war, or before I arrived to the United States, my name was Marian Chervinsky. I was born in Warsaw, Poland in 1920. At the outbreak of the war, I was 19 years old. My father died when I was 12 years old. I was raised primarily by my mother. I graduated from high school in 1937 and went on to industrial school, from which I graduated in 1939, about 2 months before the war broke out. My family was an assimilated Jewish family, and I mean by that we were assimilated in the religious sense, but there was a strong national Jewish feeling, primarily probably from my mother's side, more maybe than from my father's side. I was told that when I was born in 1920, my father tried to register as a free thinker, in other words, non-religious person, but shortly before it was going to happen, he was rejected by the Poles for a position which he applied and he was entitled to, because purely on the grounds that he is Jewish, and I guess that's where it was a big turnover in his personality when I was born, and he realized he is a Jew, he will remain a Jew, he has to be a Jew. But I went to a Polish high school, gymnasium, which had quite a big percentage of Jews as far as Polish situation was concerned. It was a private school, and that's why the Jewish population, Jewish students were in greater numbers, because they could pay. Those who attended could pay the money, and it was very expensive. My parents in my very early years were very well-to-do people, and in 1929, 1930, they lost all what they had almost due to the crash on the stock exchange in the United States. Our business was strictly connected to the dollar. And became more difficult. My dad died in 1932, as I said, when I was about 3 months before my bar mitzvah. And I was raised by my mother. Graduated, I will go on to 1939, because the rest is maybe not that important. In 1939, I graduated from high school, from the industrial school, and I returned to Warsaw, where I was to spend my vacation, and I was supposed to start my job in September. I'm sorry, I'll be going back and forth for a while. Situation in Poland before the war was, as probably most of you know, for Jews was not the best one. It wasn't as bad as in Hitler's Germany, but it wasn't good. There were numerous clauses on the universities. The Jews were not accepted to public high schools, even if they deserved it on scholastic basis. It was hard to get a good job for a Pole on a government position or anywhere where the government was concerned, and even in the private industry run by Poles, it was very difficult for a Jew to get a good position. I encountered a few instances of anti-Semitism personally. Number one, when the academic year started, the whole city was in uproar of anti-Semitic movements, and riots, small-type riots on the streets was enough for a group of Poles to meet a Jewish man or a Jewish boy on the street and attack him and molest him or call him names. It was a daily occurrence, and I guess that most of us kind of learned to live with it and accepted it as a way of life. Interestingly enough, when I arrived to this country, I was why at this time, under these circumstances, we did not decide to emigrate someplace. And I answered this person that he told me his history in Minneapolis, where he had to fight his way back from school back home because he was Jewish all the time. And I said, nevertheless, you and your parents did not emigrate to Palestine, which was Palestine at the time either, but you felt this is where you are, this is where you're going to live, and that's where you're going to make your living. You had your roots there, the parents had the business there, you were established. It was hard, it was difficult. In 1939, September 1st, the war broke out. We were expecting it since August, and there were big political moves going through Europe between the Germans and the Russians, and mobilization in Germany and mobilization in Poland. And newspapers were full of accusations, and seemed that the war is becoming unavoidable. September 1st, Friday, will be an unforgettable day. When we woke up about 5 o'clock in the morning, I guess it was, we heard airplanes and sirens and bombs, and we put on the radio to see what happens, and about few minutes after we opened the radio, the president of Poland went on the waves, the radio waves, and announced that the Germans crossed the Polish border and the war is going on. And I tried to, during the time, I was in the age to go to the army. Of course, 19 years I already was on a commission before the war started. And as a Jew, I was officially supposed to be taken to an officer's school. Not as a Jew, I mean as a high school graduate. I was supposed to be taken to an officer's school, not to go to a regular regiment service. And Jews were usually not accepted to officer schools. They were given a category which was, we don't need you anymore. I mean, there's over-contingent, or too many people already applied, and we don't need you right now. They were more gladly taken Germans than us because they considered them better friends probably than we were. Anyway, I was trying, I would say very honestly, I was quite patriotic Polish Jew. I was raised there, I was born there, there was a lot of attachment. And I tried to enlist. And I was told, not right now, maybe another week, since we're very disorganized. Well, I went to my high school on one day. It was about the 4th or 5th day of the war. I went to my high school and talked to the principal of the school who knew me for many, many years. And I asked him for a red letter recommendation. I should be at least maybe accepted to a militia in the city which they were forming because young men were taken to the army. I received the letter. I could never get into the militia. Probably, again, my Jewish religion was not, still at that time even was unacceptable. On September 6th, the president of the city of Warsaw, the mayor, but we used to be called president, announced that all the able men should leave Warsaw and go east because the Germans are approaching. There eventually be a mobilization and we will be needed. And at that time, I left Warsaw in a group of 14 people, 13 men and one young lady, my friend from my young years who was already married and her husband was with us. And we went east. I left my mother. It was her wish I should go. And that was the last time I saw her. We moved on very fast east because my uncles had a lot of money with them and they were buying out their way east by renting cars, by renting farmers' horse-drawn buggies, and so we were not walking like most of the population was, but we were going on east very fast, and we wind up almost by the Russian border on the day before the Russians took over or entered Poland, which was, if my memory is correct, September 16th. It was Rosh Hashanah. And, well, we wound up being on the occupied Russian zone of Poland. And shortly thereafter, I received news that my mother was very severely wounded during the air raids on Warsaw, and that she is in hospital, and she is in a very serious condition. So I decided I'm going back, which I did. And when I went back, my mother wasn't alive anymore. And I remained in Warsaw on the German side. Until for about a year, we lived wherever we lived, mixed with the Poles. In December came an order that we have to put the Jewish armband, which was a Jewish armband, means a band. It was a white band with a blue Star of David.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I was a single. I was the only child. Mm-hmm. I had a very large family on my father's side. A lot of my father had a lot of brothers and a sister. After when I came back and my mother was dead, I did live for quite a while with one of my uncles. Our apartment where we lived ourselves before the war was bombed out. I had nowhere to go to my own apartment.
How did you support yourself?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I can only tell you that the little that my mother left, and I don't know if I knew of everything that she left, I used to sell it and live of it. A diamond ring, a brooch, a diamond watch, a fur coat, a necklace, whatever. Things that were left, slowly I was selling those things and lived for it. Until the time that I started working and I was earning practically nothing and I really wasn't paid. That was actually the main source of survival. My first encounter with the Germans was when I was riding a streetcar. I lived with my uncle in a very Gentile neighborhood of Poland, and we were going to visit another of my uncles, and we took a streetcar, and we were stopped at one point by Germans, and they entered and they were calling all the Jews out. My uncle and myself, we did not wear a Jewish armband at the time because we felt it would be safer as we travel as a Poles. So any Pole could detect that I am a Jew, a very Semitic look as far as Poles are concerned. Here I could be Mexican, Hungarian, or whatever. And a little young child, 5, 6 years old, stepped into the streetcar and brought a German in and pointed at me, Jude. I was taken off the streetcar and was given 5 or 4 horses to lead. What happened was they took the horses away in someplace in the outskirts of Warsaw from the farmers, and they were taking them to the German barracks, and they needed people to just lead the horses. They didn't want to do it themselves. That was my first encounter direct with the German. I was leading the horses from one end of Warsaw to the other, about 3 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours walk. Never had anything to do with horses, was petrified by them. But my uncles remained on the streetcar. My uncle remained on the streetcar. And he went wherever he went, and then they sat and they waited and they worried about me, because a lot of times when the Jews were caught to work like this on the street, they not necessarily were coming back. They were taken to different camps, labor camps, and maybe come back after 2, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, and sometimes maybe not come. But I happened to come back in a few hours. Was at this time, so to speak, a lucky coincidence. I didn't have work to do. Days were long, and there was nothing to do, and there was not very much to think, and the future was bleak. I might maybe recount a story. I had a cousin who came to me one day before the ghetto started and told me that they live in Poland and they're going to Italy. they have false affidavits to go to Palestine. And for money, the SS gave them a legal permit to leave the country and go to Italy. And they say, if I want to go with them, I am welcome. It costs $1,000 in gold dollars. And I said, if I would have the money, in order to have the money, I probably have to sell everything I have. And for this type of money, I can very comfortably survive the war here and not go out into the world without a penny and be a beggar to start with. And so I decided I'm not going. Probably it's the biggest mistake I ever made. They survived the war in England, London.
You had no concept at this time that the war would last a long time? Or
No. We didn't believe at the time that the war will last more than a year.
What was your idea of what would probably happen? That the war would last a year, then what would happen?
What would happen later?
Yeah.
Probably things would go back to normal, and I personally was thinking, if I ever survive the war, I'm going to emigrate from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And probably I was thinking in terms of Israel, of Palestine, because I was, when I was in high school, one of the plans was that I should go to Petah Tikva, to agriculture school, and I was taking Hebrew as a language at home, which I did speak fluently when I was 17. I've forgotten a lot of it, and almost all of it today. But I couldn't go because of financial problems. The citizens of Poland were not allowed to buy in foreign currency. You had to get a permit for it. And a student wanted to emigrate, to go out of the country to study. He had to receive a permission from the Secretary of Treasury to buy so many dollars or German marks or francs or whatever. And whatever they allowed me to buy was not nearly enough for me to go to a school, for my mother, in other words, to buy that money. And I couldn't live there and go to school, pay for the school, pay for the apartment, and it was not nearly enough. I engaged, so I say I didn't have very much to do. The days were very long. You couldn't go out on the street during the day because the Germans were catching the Jews to work, and young people were afraid, so we were sitting home during the day. I lived at this time still, as I said, in a quite gentile part of Warsaw. I enlisted as a volunteer worker to the social self-help organization, which was run independently of the Jewish community. It was a strictly citizens-run organization and was supported by the American Joint American Joint Distribution Committee and HIAS as well. And I received a job as a welfare officer for a district. My position was to there were so many free dinners or so many free soups, and people were coming to screen them who deserves it, who doesn't deserve it, and give them the ticket for the free soup. I worked there for a while. It gave me a certain type of security because at the beginning we received certain certificates which supposedly were recognized by the German authorities, and we could be on the street and not be caught to work. But we were all day in the office anyway. We really worked hard. There was a lot of work to do. I met in this office a young lady. Young people, we fell in love. Her father was a very prominent Jewish journalist. I was not maybe quite accepted because I didn't know any Yiddish, and he was an Yiddishist. Maybe you know the name, Aaron Einhorn.
Mm-hmm.
He was worked for the Moment in Warsaw. Also was a correspondent to Jewish newspapers in North America and South America. We married in 1941. the wedding took place in the big synagogue of Warsaw, but the big synagogue of Warsaw was not allowed to be used by the Germans. The sanctuary was, we were not allowed, so it was taken in the rabbi's chambers. We had to be, that was already during the ghetto time. I maybe skipped, but I'm trying to follow this idea of meeting this young person. In order to arrive safely to the wedding ceremonies and then back home, we had friends who were on the Jewish police force in the Warsaw ghetto, and we asked them for help, and we would go under their escort. As supposedly we were under arrest, but we were going actually to our wedding, and when we were coming back home, we were still under arrest supposedly. But anyway, I worked there for a while, and then the ghetto was opened in 1940. As you see, my chronology is very bad.
Where did you and your wife go? Where did you go back to that apartment in the non-Jewish neighborhood where you were living before?
We lived at this time in after we married. There was already ghetto, so we lived in the ghetto.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we lived. We sub-rented an apartment from a lady who had an apartment, and she was all alone. And
so the two of you worked in this for this welfare
Yes.
organization.
She remained working there, and I later switched to work for the Jewish administration of the ghetto, the Jewish Community Center. Gave me a better security from being caught or going to forced labor. At this time, all the young Jewish men, I guess up to age of 45 or 50, I don't remember, had to register to go to work, and they had to work, I don't remember, so many days a week or so many days a month. And those who didn't want to work, they could buy their way out by paying so and so much, and for this money somebody was hired and was paid to go in his stead. The situation was very bleak. We didn't really know what was going to happen, and I think that we would not survive the war as such. I mean, those who did survive, if not for the spark of hope which always remained with the Jewish people, at least remained with me. And if you sit down to think about logically and wanted to, put two and two together, there was no way to survive, really. You could, when you started figuring, just no way that we could survive. And there was always a maybe, a little spark of hope someplace in the future. The life in ghetto was very difficult. It was very difficult because people, I'm talking about the majority, I'm not talking about those who were making black marketing business. They didn't have what to eat. You would get up in the morning, go to work, for instance. I had to walk quite a long distance to work. You would find dead bodies on the street covered with newspapers. Children in terrible condition. Sanitary conditions were very bad. And typhoid was rampaging the ghetto, really. The Germans were closing house after house because if they found, or if there was a person who was sick and was officially declared sick, there were a lot of people who were sick underground, if I should say so, but if they were sick and declared sick officially, the building was closed, and those people who would have to go through, what you call it, quarantine. And conditions were very bad. Very bad. Because I married into this prominent Jewish family, had a little life easier. And the easier it was because my father-in-law was assigned to a kitchen for Jewish intellectualists, where we would get one good meal a day, and he had the right to bring his entire family. So his wife, his 3 children, including my wife, and myself, We would be there every day at just a certain time and have our meal, which was really, under the circumstances at the time, it was a good meal, probably sustained us to live better. Our official rations were a little piece of black bread and some marmalade made of what do you call it? Beets. No sugar, no synthetic coffee. Maybe sometimes very poor, very little and very poor. And as I said, there was starvation, was rampant in the ghetto. In this diner, as I should call it, or this cafeteria where we were going to eat, I happened to have the privilege of meeting some very prominent Jewish people, newspaper people, writers, artists, and even so I was very assimilated. I didn't speak any Yiddish. There was strictly Yiddish-speaking community. I don't know why, but I was very nicely accepted. I found out later on that they had what used to be called, they called it Oner Shabbat, and they would meet every Friday night in somebody else's home every week. And each one would recount what happened to him in the ghetto during this day, and it would get recorded. Those things are known today as Dr. Ringelbrum's files. My father-in-law was one of them. I don't know how big part he had in it, but I know he was one of them. He was a very sick man, incidentally. After a short period of time, the ghetto was divided. So the policy of the Germans was to concentrate us smaller territory all the time. So the original ghetto was quite large, but was divided. There was what was called a small ghetto and a large ghetto, and it's purely by size. And there was one street which was running through the ghetto, which was called Chłodna, and only about half a block was in the ghetto on one side, and the rest was, only just half a block was in the ghetto, and the rest was on the, what we called the Aryan side, or Polish side. And in order to cross from the large ghetto to the small ghetto, the Germans built a bridge across the street. This is a very famous bridge, probably, because it brought a lot of tragedy to a lot of Jewish people. I myself had to cross the bridge twice a day going to work. There was a German assessment there was a guard on each side of the bridge. There were, a German assessment whom we did called Frankenstein. He was a sadist. He was the early morning every day when people were going to work. He would stab people, mostly Jews with beards, older people primarily. He very seldom would stab people like myself, young people, because he wouldn't have enough fun maybe with us. But he would make them go through different types of calisthenics until they would faint. He would beat them with the butt of the gun. He would cut the beard off with his, what you call this?
Bayonet.
Bayonet. And people were petrified. And usually when I was going through I had to approach the bridge on the side where he was stationed, I would not approach the bridge right away. I would watch if he is busy with somebody else. Because if he was busy with somebody else, that was a time to run through really quick, because he couldn't, like you drive on the freeway. A cop drives a ticket, you can go 65 miles an hour. He's not going to stop you right there. So I was lucky. I never got into his hands. there were a streetcar going through the Warsaw Ghetto, which went through the ghetto without a stop, an electrical streetcar, a regular city streetcar, because, as I said, this street Chłodna was only a very short block, and so there were Gentile people on one end on one side of the ghetto and on the other, and they were traveling from one end of town, and there was no way probably for them to lay new streetcar lines, so they made the streetcar run through the ghetto, through this street and also through the other street, which was like one of the main streets of the ghetto. And those streetcars had to go fast as they could, and they were not allowed to stop. But there were young Jewish kids who would get on that streetcar where it was going very fast and get out of the ghetto on that streetcar and buy or steal or whatever they acquired, either bread or butter or margarine or potatoes, and come back the same way and jump off the streetcar as they were coming into ghetto. And that's how some of them were making a living. Some others were smuggling food, grown-ups as well as children. But children could do more because they were small. They could sneak in easier through things, and they were not as visible. But the buildings which were in the ghetto were bordering the Gentile side, at that time at least, at the very beginning. So people would dig a hole underneath the building or go through the attic, break a hole in between the houses were adjacent, break a hole, and those kids would, through the holes, go on the Gentile side and smuggle some food and help. They really were the earners, the life earners for their families. There was a Jewish streetcar in the ghetto, organized by some very infamous Jewish people. Probably heard, probably don't know if you know, there was in the ghetto itself, it was a very well organized, so to speak, community with our own city administration, so to speak, Jewish police, health department, everything that supposedly a district like that needs. We also had what you would call here a kind of a criminal police, completely separate, nothing to do with the Jewish community, was organized by, I don't remember, two men. One was Heller, if I remember right, and another name I forget right now. They were called the 13th because they were, headquarters were on Leszno Street, number 13. They would wear the same uniforms as the Jewish police, except the Polish police had a blue band around their heads, caps, and they had a green band. They were officially named as economic surveillance of the ghetto. There should be no black market. There should be the scales should be calibrated correctly. There should be no dealing with gold and diamonds and foreign currency and things. But they acquired a very bad name. They collaborated, if not all of them, a great amount of them, including the principals with the German people. And they ran a streetcar drawn by horses.
Did you have any personal contact with them?
No. Shy away from this.
How long were you in the ghetto?
I was in the ghetto from the very beginning to the very liquidation of the ghetto. I was in the ghetto into the ninth day of the uprising. On July 22nd, 1942, when I was sitting in the office in the Jewish community, working at the desk, suddenly a big commotion. You could feel something happening, and the chief of the department came and said that President Chernyakov, was Engineer Adam Chernyakov, that he has visitors from the highest SS commando for the general government, which was the Polish part occupied of Poland, including the commandant of the SS in Warsaw and some very high officials. Something must be happening. And as we found out later, Chernyakov was asked at the time to sign that he agrees that because officially of the overpopulation of the Warsaw Ghetto, which at that time was officially around 500,000 Jews, unofficially there was probably 3/4, that he agrees that 10,000 people will be evacuated daily. We didn't know where. They're going to go towards the east. They will be working on the farms. They will be working, helping the German army wherever it's needed. They're going to work, and they will have better conditions. They will get food. They will have work. And Engineer Chernyakov, whom I might consider a big hero, asked them to leave for a few minutes. I probably recount his story that is known to everybody, but I happen this personal experience. And he asked them to leave for a few minutes and called one of his assistants and asked him to bring a glass of water. And he committed suicide. He took cyanide. And when the Germans were waiting and 5-10 minutes went by, they weren't called back. They asked the vice president, which was with them, the Jewish, to go in and see what's happening. And when they went, there was a dead body of Chernyakov there. Since the Germans decided that they cannot do any business with the Jewish community leadership as such, they turned to the Jewish police commandantur. And unfortunately, they received a certain cooperation. The following day, the deportation, forced deportation started. People were told that if they will volunteer to come, they will receive a loaf of bread, a kilogram of marmalade. And there was enough hungry people, believe it or not, who went.
What was your reaction to this? When
We
you,
didn't
when
know.
you heard this?
I'll be very honest, I could not at this time, if I talked to people who were older than I was and who knew the Germans, and I'm going back to 1939 right now, they said that all the story we hear from Germany must be very well exaggerated because the Germans are very high-cultured people and it's impossible for them to become beasts like they are being described.
Did you discuss it with your wife?
We discuss what to do to survive day by day. Where when you go today to work, be sure that you don't do this, and be sure you do that, and be careful of that. And I meet you here, and in case I cannot meet you there, then don't get panic. Maybe I'm, things like that. But not really any plan. There was no plan. There was no future. They couldn't make any plans for the future because you have to live day by day. You saw people dying daily on the streets. You saw people being killed daily by the streets by the Germans. They would enter the ghetto for also whatever reason. If they didn't like you, there was no reason that the German could not take a handgun or a rifle or whatever he had and kill a Jew, and he went unpunished. That was legal. The Jew was beyond any protection of the law.
Yes, but given this, when you heard of the deportations, what was your reaction to it?
I really don't know. I couldn't really tell you very honestly. I was afraid of it. I was afraid of any change the Germans are introducing. Because once the situation kind of normalized, you found your ways how to go about it and how to survive at that situation. And the situation changes, and it became frightful what to do to protect yourself and what would be the right things to do. And of course, one didn't know. I did not have the need to go. I didn't need the loaf of bread, and I didn't need the kilogram of margarine. I had this family from my uncles, and I had my family from my wife's side, and we were, according to the situation, we were fairly comfortable. we weren't hungry. We were hungry at times, but we weren't hungry like other people were hungry. But we were dressed comme ci, comme ça. We weren't going to make it. Maybe very frivolous to speak about it now, but there were nightclubs in the ghetto. There were restaurants in the ghetto. There were concerts. There was a Jewish theater. And if one could afford, and if one had the mood for it, so to speak, then he went. So there were some people who lived, the hell with everything else. Today, I live today. What will be tomorrow? Forget it. I don't know if I live tomorrow. But we never believed that those 10,000 people which are leaving Warsaw daily, that they're going to anything that we found out later is called Treblinka. That would be, if anybody would come and tell me that at that time, I would disregard it. I would say that's a pure fantasy. It's impossible. How can you kill 10,000 people daily? How can you make an industry out of killing people?
Were there rumors of that sort?
Not
that you heard?
at that time. Not at that time. The deportation lasted until September. And during this time, the ghetto was made smaller, and I was moved to another location. I mean, I had to move to another location. But and I will have to recount that. At the end of the first deportation, maybe I should recount. This is maybe be interesting. There was one day during this deportation period that the German units left Warsaw, and they went to evacuate a little town 30 kilometers out of Warsaw called Otwock, which was kind of a resort place for lung sick people, very Jewish little place, where my father-in-law happened to be at the time. We smuggled him out from the ghetto when the deportation started, hoping that he would be safer there in the small place. A lot of very well-known people were smuggled out to little towns around. And they went this day and, excuse me for the expression, they cleaned out Otwock in one day. But all the Jews were killed, transported, whatever. I don't know what happened actually to my father-in-law. I was told by Jonas Turkov, whom I knew very well, that he had report that he was killed, shot on the spot, refused to come down from his room and be deported. So they went in and they just shot him. This day, when the Germans left the Warsaw Ghetto, the Jewish police force was told by the Germans that each one of the police people has to bring to the Umschlagplatz, which is the place of deportation. If my memory is correct, each one of them has to bring 10 people for deportation. I was at the time already a janitor of a big building, and my way of moving freely through the street or get out and find out what's going on was to take a big broom and this big tray, like I forget what you call it, that you collect the dirt after you sweep, and go on the streets. And there was a lot of horse droppings on the streets of Warsaw because there was horse-drawn buggies and things. And to go and clean this up, because I knew if I do that, the German will be petrified to approach me. Even if he will see me, because I did such a dirty work, he will not approach me for no reason whatsoever. Well, I went out on this day because we were in hiding in a cellar of our building. And I went out to see what's going on, and I was approached by a Jewish policeman, and he asked me for my identifications, which I gave him, and I had all proper identification. He took them with him. So I said, "You're being taken to Umschlagplatz," and I said, "But I'm not subject to deportation. He says, that's your problem. My problem is to bring 10 people. I couldn't care less. They had a big horse-drawn wagon with them, put me on the wagon, and we were going through the streets, and there were 4 of them or 3 of them, so they had to have 30 or 40 people on the wagon before they can turn back to the Umschlagplatz. While we were driving through one of the streets, I spotted a lieutenant of the Jewish police riding on a rickshaw, a man-drawn rickshaw, who was a very good friend of mine. And I called him, and I said, save me. So he stopped the convoy, and he walked over to the officer, and he asked me, where are your papers? I said, this man has it. So he walks over to the officer, to the policeman, and he says to him, give me this man's papers. He is perfectly clear. He says, Mr. Lieutenant, you want his paper, you want to release him, would you please sign into my service book that you released 1 man from my convoy? He says to me, you know what, let them take you there. I'm going there. I will wait for you there, and I see if I can take you out. That was a terrible experience. I was taken into the Umschlagplatz, and I cannot describe you what was going on there. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people, not only from this day transport, but from previous days, sitting on the ground without food, screaming, people petrified and scared. And when I get very nervous, I have to eat, at least at this time. And I was looking for something to eat, and not maybe because I was really hungry, but I had something to eat. And I didn't know where those transports are going. You asked me if we knew where. I said, I didn't know, but I was petrified of it. And so I spotted a group of young men, who I knew 1 or 2 of them there, and they had quite a lot of bread. They came from work from the outside of ghetto. They were stopped at the ghetto gates and taken straight here. And they had a lot of bread. They didn't know what to do with the bread. So I said, I'm hungry. Can you give me a piece of bread? And he cut a nice chunk of bread, and I started eating. And after a while, I heard somebody calling my name. And that was this friend of mine, this lieutenant, and he told me, he says, I have a way of taking you out. Just on the merits of your name. My name was Czerwinski, as I said. One of my uncles was a newspaper man in a Jewish paper in Polish language. Mm. And way before that, he was a high officer in the Polish police force until it became very anti-Semitic and he had to leave. And so he was pretty well known in the city. And he says, I went to the Jewish commandant who was in charge of this whole operation. That was a lawyer. His name was Lakin, a fellow very, very short, wearing a leather jacket, riding breeches and boots with a peich. I don't know how you say a peich in English.
It's smooth. It's like a baton.
Yeah, like a baton. That's why you hit a horse with when you ride a horse. And leather gloves in his hands. And this friend of mine told me, he says, when I bring you in front of him, and you're going to take a girl with you, and you will say to him that this is your wife. And he will ask you who you are, and you will tell him your name, and he will ask you what's the name of your father, and you tell him your father's name was Herman Czerwinski, which was my uncle. And he knew him from before the war, and he will hit you once, because there were a few Germans here there, to make believe that you are being punished, and he will tell me to take you out, and I will take you out. And that's exactly what happened. That was a terrible experience. Worse than that, once I got out from the Umschlagplatz, this friend of mine had to go back. He was on duty there. And so he was trying to find another...
10 minutes on this tape.
So he was trying to find somebody who would safely take me to my house or to my location. And we spotted my cousin's husband, who was also in the police. And he asked him if he would take me. He says, no, I have no time to take him because I need to bring 10 people today. People were very selfish, and people became maybe inhuman. Anyway, another policeman who already did fulfill his duty this day agreed to take me to the nearest Jewish community office where I was supposed to wait through the day. And when I came there, and he told him that I'm sent by recommendation of Lieutenant so-and-so, I was told, you cannot sit with us in the office here, because if a German should come to inspect, you are illegal, and we will be all punished for it. And so they told me to get out. And before he told me actually to get out, they brought him a lunch or breakfast, which was unheard to see anything like this at the time. This was the improvisation department of the Warsaw Ghetto. And I just broke down at the time. I told him, I don't need your help. You eat your eggs and tomatoes or whatever he had there. I said, I will find my way. In the same building on another floor was another department where it did work people that I knew. I used to work with them before in other offices of the community. And I walked in, and they told me, here is an empty desk and a chair, take a piece of paper, pencil, make yourself look busy, and wait out the day. And that's how I escaped this particular day of deportation. While I was a janitor in this building was across the street from the infamous Pawiak jail of Warsaw. Pawiak was a criminal prison before the war, a criminal jail for criminals, and during the war the Germans kept there the so-called political prisoners. And in my entrance to the building, there was a post, a guard, who was guarding the walls, the outside walls of the Pawiak. And it was a Polish policeman. There were Polish policemen on the duty in the ghetto too. And we became quite friendly. I was a little scared of him at the beginning, but as time was going on, he proved himself. And I was doing with him a little business. I started making a little money so I could buy things on the black market, something to eat. And unknowingly to me, he was collaborating with the Jewish underground movement. But I did not know about it absolutely until maybe the very, very last day. Our friendship survived until I was in the ghetto, and he was the one who came 12 hours before the Jewish uprising started and told me what's going to happen in 12 hours. He told me, I want to know where you'll be in hiding, because I will be trying to bring you food or maybe come even to take you out on the Gentile side. And I told to him, as much as I trust you, but I will be with a number of other people, and I really have probably to think about it for a while and ask these people permission to tell you where our hiding place is. But I did that on my own, and I told him where I will be. I told him there are two possibilities. I will be either here or here. And he was trying to help me. I will come to that in a moment. The first deportation, going back again, ended in September. The numbers of the Jews were very much, we were, I guess, left about, I don't know exact numbers, I wouldn't want to say, but supposedly around 50,000 people officially. The life went on kind of very uneventful and very depressed. People were very, very depressed. We finally start realizing that things are worse than we ever could expect.
The Jews come in from the
outside. And the news started coming, what is happening with the transports. There were some Jews who escaped. There were rumors that the man, an engineer on the train, would report supposedly so and so and so and so. There were rumors more and more and more and more. And finally no letters were coming. And so we started to believe that the rumors are true. We lived like this until the second deportation, which was on January 18th. Our numbers were again decimated, but that lasted very long. It was nothing to compare to what was the first deportation. And I and my family, we survived by hiding. Unfortunately, I was not engaged with the Jewish Defense Forces. Probably one reason that there was not enough guns and arms.
Had you a choice? I mean,
No, I was never offered, and I didn't know these people who were inside, who were active. And it was very, very confidential.
Confidential.
Yeah, they were afraid not only of non-Jews, but they were afraid of some Jews as well. After the first uprising, they became more active in the ghetto. They committed a lot of terrorist acts. They killed Lakin. They killed another few very well-known people who had very bad reputation. And we knew that organization like that exists, but I didn't know where to go, who to ask. And unknown to me, being a janitor of this big building, which was different building again, I don't tell you, but we kept on moving all the time. I didn't know that there is a fighting group, so to speak, in my building, active group. And I was very friendly with one of them, but I was never told. Do you want to interrupt?
Yeah, about a minute. Can you wind down at this particular story?
Yeah. Well, I just would like to go to the outbreak of the uprising, if I may, at the beginning. I was approached...
All right, we'll change tapes.
Yeah, okay. On April 19th, Erev Passover, the first Seder night, which we did not celebrate, we didn't have nothing to celebrate with. I had this friend of mine, this Polish policeman in my house, and he told me that the Germans are going to enter the ghetto on the following day, early morning, or during the night, probably in the morning because they were afraid of nights inside of the ghetto. And that I should prepare myself and go into hiding or do whatever. A few minutes thereafter, one of the inhabitants of the building, a young man whom I knew, came over and he told me what's going on. And he says, we're going to resist. We don't have a gun for you, but we need you because we have a Molotov cocktail unit on top of our roof. And we need, there will be liaison people running back and forth. Since you have the key to the gate of the building, I call it gate, I don't know what's the proper word for it. We want you to stay there and keep it locked. When you will see a flashlight go on twice, you open the gate, you don't ask any question, you let the person more likely on a bicycle run into the building, and you lock the building right away. Which I did, and I was on this position till about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I suddenly start feeling a little proud. Here we're not going to go like sheep anymore. And but I really probably didn't realize yet what's going to be. Anyway, at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I was told to go into hiding. I cannot be of any use to them because I don't have a gun, they don't have any spare guns. And I should be in hiding, and he asked me where I will be in case they need me, and I should leave the gate to the building open so they can keep on going back and forth as they need. I went into the hiding. And
your wife was with you?
Yeah, my wife, my aunt, and my sister-in-law. That was all what was left of our family at the time. And we sat there during the days, and at nights we would go to our apartments because the Germans were inactive during the nights. On about the second or third day, we were told by those people, by the Jewish young people who were running back and forth, that they're burning the ghetto.
You heard shooting?
We heard shooting all the time. We heard airplanes, tanks. We heard explosions. We had heard small guns shooting. At this time, I was in hiding on the 5th floor of the building, on the attic, which was about the 5th floor of the building. And as I said, the Molotov cocktail was on the roof, but at the other corner. So, but we did hear the fight. We did hear the runnings and the screamings and the German voices and the Jewish voices. But again, when I asked this young man who told me what I will do, and I knew that he's involved, when I saw him one evening, and I asked him, what's going on? Is there anything that I can do? They were very secretive. He told me, unfortunately, says, there's nothing you can do. We don't have a gun. We don't have enough ammunition. We are running out of everything. It's kind of, we will stand till the last of one dies, but we don't have room for more. So I started, they told us that they're burning the ghetto. And the way they burned the ghetto was very planned, very systematic. They were burning by streets, starting from the southern end of the ghetto, going toward the northern end of the ghetto where the Umschlagplatz was, and this way liquidating it very, very well organized manner. Interesting, probably incident was that our roof on our building started burning by a spark brought over by one of the fires. And we had an opening between our building and the next building. In the next building used to live the second president, or the man who succeeded Chernyakov, Engineer Lichtenbaum, who was already taken out of the ghetto by the Germans at the time. There was a telephone in his apartment, because he was the president of the Jewish community. And we picked up the telephone and we called the fire department. And we told them that our building is on fire. And the question was, where do you live? And we told him, Muranovska 44. He says, okay, our engines will be there in a short while. And sure enough, some engines came, some fire people went on the roof, poured water on it, extinguished the fire, and went. When our turn, when our street came to burn, we did the same trick. We were answered, today we're not allowed to come on Muranovska. So that was all very well planned and organized. In the meantime, we changed our hiding to a cellar without any reason and without any plan. Just one day you decided you go there, the other day you decided you go here. We went into a cellar, and when our house was put on fire, the smoke started infiltrating the hiding chamber, and there came a question, and it actually came up to a vote. Do we stay and die from suffocation and fire? And we knew by this time, we were convinced we're going to death. Or we get out and get killed by a shot or by a gas chamber or whatever it might be. And we decided it will be the death by fire is too painful. So we better go out. And we went out. We were, the Warsaw, first time I actually seen the Warsaw after this war, so to speak. And Warsaw was in complete ruins and on fire, and it would look terrible. A very depressed feeling, completely no hope for anything whatsoever. And we were taken to the Umschlagplatz and sent out to Majdanek. I spent in Majdanek only one night. We saw in the transport. a very inhuman way. And I presume that you wouldn't transport cattle the way they transported us to the camp. We were loaded like sardines into the boxcars, spent, I don't know how long it took us to be there without water. People were dying from thirst. And when we arrived to Majdanek, when we were told to get out, my aunt, who was staying next to me, as people were staying, I say, like sardines, when she was released from the pressure of people, she fell. And we realized that she committed suicide. She took cyanide. Some people did carry with them to kill themselves. It would come to the very last moment rather than to suffer from a gas chamber or whatever. And they took her out on stretchers. And they took us to a building where we spent the night, the three of us, my wife, my sister-in-law, myself, and other people. The next morning we were taken into the camp itself. This was like a reception part of it. And a young German assessman arrived on a motorcycle and declared that he needs 800-some people for work in a camp, and they were counted young people, and I was taken out without being able to say goodbye to my family.
They took only men?
Pardon?
Only men?
Only men. And we were taken out to a labor camp called Budzin, which was a part of Majdanek. And Majdanek was the big central camp and had a lot of satellite camps around. There was a camp where this man who came and took us out from there, his name was, if I remember his correct rank, was Oberscharführer. His Leutnant was Feixt, was a sadist, a murderer. He would not go to sleep unless he killed somebody that very day. He had a small handgun, but because his hand was very unstable, he had a little handle built onto it, so he was using it like a rifle. And if he had no reason to kill somebody, he would just walk into the crowd and just shoot into the crowd. And this is absolutely no exaggeration. As a very vivid moment of, very vivid in my memory of an experience like that was when he went one day. All the commandants of these little camps had a meeting in the main camp in Majdanek, and he wasn't all day in the camp, so he had no victim. He arrived late at night. He walked into a barrack where it was dark and people were asleep, and just used this little hand machine gun and killed whatever amount of people were killed at that day. A very, very inhuman being. I saw him execute a number of people which we had to witness. He had ideas how to use inmates of the camp to help him kill people. He was a sick man, and it was not going into any politics, but it was all legalized. He was not punished for it, and it was on the records. I was assigned to a work on a railroad, one of the hardest work one could ever be assigned to in a camp, except for Steinbrucher, breaking of stones. Had no food. I swallowed from hunger very quickly because I satisfied my stomach pains with drinking water, and my head was huge, my legs, and again, through the connection of my family name and my father-in-law name, there are always connections, always helped. I did begged out that I wanted to have a job changed. And that all depended on the Jewish, mostly on the Jewish commandantur of the camp. And there were some very influential people from the Jewish community in Warsaw who had influence on this Jewish commandantur. The Jewish commandantur in Budzin consisted of POWs, Polish POWs, Jewish Polish POWs from the eastern part of Poland who could not be sent back from POW camps home because it was Russia. So they remained, and they were the organizers, the beginners, the initiators, the one who built the camp. They were wearing Polish uniforms dyed to another color. They were not the khaki color, but dark brown color. And I have to tell in all the sincerity that they were very fine people. In my case, they had a feeling of solidarity with the Jews. They were trying to do as much as they could under the circumstances to help us. I was once hit by the commandant of the camp, but while he hit me, told me, I'm hitting you so the German won't hit you. And try running, because if not, he will come and he's going to start beating you. So he saved me maybe at that instance. They were really, I have to pay my respects to these people. I was, as I say, I was asking a change for Reskov job, and I was assigned to a school where they were teaching us how to build parts to airplanes. Went through the school for a few weeks, and then was assigned a labor place in a factory which was 7 kilometers outside of the camp. So we walked 7 kilometers back and forth every day to work. We worked 12 hours a day. Our food ration was synthetic coffee in the morning, a little water called soup during the mid of the day, with a very small slice of bread, and in the evening again some kind of a very watery soup with a little bigger piece of bread. And I don't know, somebody recently said that Auschwitz was run on 2,500 calories daily. I don't think that we had 6 or 7 calories a day, and work was very hard.
How long were you there?
I was 23.
How long?
Oh, how long I was there? I was there from April till about February or March of the following year. So
then you were sent to...
No, excuse me. Yeah, about a year.
Uh-huh. And
About
then you...
not quite a year. About 9 months I was there.
when did you go from there?
From there I was sent to another camp, which I was trying to, by my own desire, I was transferred to another camp because rumors had it that our camp would be changed into concentration camps. The conditions in the other camp were also not too good. About the same as the previous one, of food, very hard work, and so on and so forth. My regular guy to pay respect to the Polish policeman, I got in touch with him, and we probably too long to go into the details. In a very illegal way, I got in touch with him, and he started sending me money every month to the camp. It costed a lot of money to arrange that, which he paid for.
Which policeman was this?
The Polish policeman whom I made acquaintance in the Warsaw Ghetto.
The same
person,
man
same
from across the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, while I was in the second camp, I received a letter from him if I would consent to be taken out to the camp by him. And he wrote me in the letter, which came in a clandestine way, that he will come as a Polish policeman with a false paper that I am he's under orders from the Gestapo to arrest me, take me to Warsaw for interrogations, and then I will be brought back and I will disappear, and he will hide me someplace. Well, whenever I wrote yes, and whenever the date was arranged, about a month or 2 months before our camp was liquidated, we were sent someplace else, and we went to Germany, to Flossenburg, so that was the end of this spark of hope.
Have you ever heard from this man
No,
since?
I didn't hear from him. I had a chance when somebody went to Poland, and maybe you know, was my late friend Bob Gerson. Went to Poland in the 60s, I guess, or late 50s or 60s. I gave him the name and the approximate address as far as I could remember. He found the name of a person. It was a very popular Polish name. Józef Wróblewski was, like John Smith, and he looked in a telephone book in the area of town where I thought he did live, and he called up. And he said who he is, and he brings regards from Marian Czerwiński from America. the telephone was hung up on the other end. They would not want to talk. So it was him or wasn't him, we don't know.
How do you think it happened that you were able to survive?
I think that it was really pure luck and maybe some lucky decisions, but mostly a very, very lucky situations, purely pure luck. There were people who had a lot of money, and you would think that they could buy their way out. They couldn't. There were some people who were very smart. They did not survive either. Some of them did. I think it was just pure luck. How you describe otherwise that one survives survived this war when we went on an evacuation march and we started 2,400 and survived only 900 some, going in groups of 200 men with SS guards on both sides and both ends of the group, and whoever could not keep up the speed of the pace they told us to march was taken into the ditch by the road and shot. I didn't have the strength to walk, but pure luck made me walk, I guess. Maybe the fear of death, or I don't know, but I personally can attribute this only to luck. And maybe being in the, well, it's the luck, being in the right place at the right time. I like to recount maybe the moment we arrived to concentration camp in Germany, in Flossenbürg. We arrived about 2,000 strong Jewish transport from Wieliczka, Poland, which is not far from Krakow. We arrived there, and this was the first camp where we arrived where Jews and non-Jews were together. Until that time, I was always in strictly Jewish concentration camps. The commandant of the ghetto, after we were completely stripped and searched, and body searched, like we today complain about the police here searching, we were searched like that. And I have to tell you, through all these camps, I managed to have with me the pictures of my family, my baccalaureate from the gymnasium, my diploma from the school, and a few things which I thought might be important if I ever survive. And I lost it here on this entrance to this camp because I was told to strip. There was nowhere I could hide it. Anyway, this commandant, whose name I don't remember, told us that we arrived to a concentration camp Flossenbürg, which until now never had Jews survive once they arrived. They were all put to death. We are the first Jewish transport which is going to be put to work. But our life expectancy is 6 weeks. And if we survive the 6 weeks, that means that we are saboteurs of the Third Reich. Because either we're stealing food or don't performing the work. It's unbelievable, he said, that anybody should survive more than that on the food you're getting and the labor you are expected to perform. A very friendly greeting just to start. We were left naked in the barracks until such time that we were assigned to a labor place, and then they were given the stripy outfits. And I was assigned to a place to work where we were with disassembled German airplanes which were shut down and take out the good parts which can be reused as spare parts, and the rest of the metal separate, steel separate, aluminum separate, bronze, and so on, so they can melt and reuse it. Our production was very, very bad. As we were the only thing I can take pride, if you ask me if I was active in the resistance. The only resistance I was really active was sabotaging in what I was doing. Either doing it badly or doing it slowly. But that all was, I was powerless to do anything else. And a lot of boys did the same thing. I don't think really nobody worked to work. plus the fact that we didn't have the strength to work. Next to us was the Steinbruch Kommando, this group of people who were working, breaking stones, and moving them from one location today and moving them back tomorrow again. There was in the Greek mythology, I guess there was Sisyph who was doing unuseful work. I guess it's in Polish there is a word Sisyphowe prace, which is useless work. And they were dying daily because it was very, very, very hard work. They were cutting their hands with the stones. They were bleeding. They didn't have, no help. And a daily occurrence was when you came back from work to the camp that you found somebody hanging on the, what you call where you hang people?
Gallows.
On the gallows, punished for whatever he might have done. I can assure you that nothing that he done was endangering the life of the Third Reich. Probably stole a piece of bread or maybe a pair of socks or something. There was, interestingly enough, in this camp there was what the Germans called a Puff, which is, I don't know how to, house of, where there were ladies, and the non-Jewish inmates of the camp had the right, they had to earn the rights to go there from time to time. I like to relate to the end, maybe to the moment of my liberation, which was in a little town in Bayern, Stamsried am Wald, liberated by 3 American tanks. I collapsed. I started crying. I guess that's when I realized that I left that world. An American soldier gave me a little bottle of cognac, which probably was in his rations, and told me to drink it. And I somehow got back to my normal situations. And we lost a lot of men the first night after liberation from overeating. People were hungry and they ate as much as they could get, and the Germans were afraid and they would put everything out they had. We cleaned up this little village. In about 12-hour time there was not a crumb of bread to be had. Even if you took a gun and told him, "I kill you," he didn't have it. We ate. We were, first I found out later, besides this little group of 900 that we were there, there was a group of Gentile people from our camp liberated. We were about 10,000 people liberated in a very small circle. This was the only little village, 1,000 inhabitants, farmers. I don't know, I felt a big letdown.
Yes. How do you feel about telling the story?
I couldn't talk about it very much for many years.
Uh-huh.
I didn't think that people were interested. I didn't know if people would believe me. There was very few people who wanted to listen to it. But like most of us, I guess, we realized that we are on our way out from this world, and we have to live. And I witnessed a story about it. It's nothing like this will ever happen again. And I believe that talking to Gentiles about it is much more important than to go to talk to Jewish children about it. Because you have to tell the Gentiles what happened to us might even happen to them. And when I spoke to a small group of kids last April, I had a lot of Orientals and very few blacks, but Orientals, and I was told the reason we like to talk to non-Jewish people is because this is not only Jewish people who can be in danger. I said, once the Germans would get finished with us, There were gypsies, there were Poles next, there would be everybody else but the Germans. They believed they are the humans, and probably they were superhumans, because regular human could not do that what they did. You had to be superhuman in the detrimental term of the word, not as a compliment. I don't know how it could happen. I don't know how anybody could sit down and write a plan and go systematically after a destruction of people just for one only reason, because they were born, in this case, Jews. It could be in another case somebody else. But in this case, just because they were Jews. I cannot understand it.
Yeah, about half a minute. Okay. Why don't we stop it at this time? Okay.